There's a kind of truth that, once spoken, undoes itself, like a candle that burns its own wick, or a name that vanishes the moment it's said aloud. You reach for it, thinking it will solidify the world, make things clearer, settle the chaos, but instead it collapses like mist, leaving you with even more questions than before. This is the truth that cancels itself. At first, it seems like revelation. You feel that sharp click in the mind, as if a puzzle piece just locked into place. Everything aligns. The past rewrites itself. The future becomes legible. You finally understand what was hidden all along. But then, a strange thing happens. That same truth, once solid, begins to wobble. It doesn't hold. It folds in on itself. Not because it was false, but because it was too true. So absolute that it swallows the context it was meant to explain. It's like seeing the edge of a map only to realize the map was never the territory. Or discovering that the answer to a riddle is another riddle. You begin to suspect something terrifying, that some truths are recursive. They refer back to themselves endlessly. The more you understand, the more you realize what understanding isn't. The very act of grasping the truth pulls it out of your hands, like trying to define consciousness by dissecting the mind, like explaining love using only logic. You may get close. You may build a beautiful model. But the thing itself, the essence, slips through. It's not because you're failing. It's because the truth is designed to unmake your certainty. Think of the paradoxes we've lived with for centuries. This statement is false. Know thyself. I only know that I know nothing. These are not riddles to be solved. They are mirrors. And when you look too long, you don't find the answer. You find yourself unraveling. And maybe that's the point. Maybe some truths exist not to be held, but to be witnessed, to bend the mind, stretch it, break its craving for finality, because the deepest truths aren't comforting. They don't resolve. They disorient. They humble. They remind you that the universe was never designed to fit in a sentence. So what do you do with a truth that cancels itself? Do you discard it as meaningless? Or do you sit with it, like a koan that refuses resolution? Maybe the goal isn't clarity, but transformation. Maybe the value of these truths is that they destroy your need for clean answers. And in the rubble of your certainty, something softer emerges, a kind of wisdom that doesn't speak in absolutes, a seeing that doesn't need to name, a truth that is felt more than known, one that leaves room for silence, for paradox, for mystery. Because in the end, maybe truth isn't something you arrive at. Maybe it's something you become in the space between knowing and unknowing. And when you finally stop trying to force it into words, it no longer cancels itself. It simply is. There's a version of you that exists just beneath the surface, not hidden from others, but hidden from yourself. You catch glimpses of them in moments of weakness, flashes of emotion, or sudden impulses you pretend never happened. You deny this version, suppress it, edit it out of your narrative. But deep down, you know it's still there. This is the paradox of the person you pretend not to be. Most of us build an identity out of preferences, habits, beliefs. A polished self, we, present to the world. We say, this is who I am. But who decided that? And what had to be buried to maintain that version of the story? Maybe you pretend not to be cruel, though you've enjoyed someone's downfall. Maybe you pretend not to be afraid, though. Fear drives more of your actions than you admit. Maybe you act confident, but are secretly filled with self-doubt. Or maybe you present as moral, knowing full well that your choices haven't always aligned with your ethics. This hidden version of you is inconvenient. It threatens the image you've worked hard to project, so you lock it away. But here's the paradox. The more you deny it, the more power it gains. Because repression is not deletion, it's storage. And stored selves have a way of leaking out. They show up in dreams, in slips of the tongue, in moments of anger or stress or silence. And when they do, they feel alien, like someone else took control, but they didn't. That was you, the part you pretend not to be. The real question is, which version is more authentic? Is it the self you construct and curate, or the one that emerges when your guard is down? And if the one you hide keeps showing up, maybe it isn't hiding at all. Maybe you're just refusing to look. The mind is skilled at building false compartments. You place the bad self in one box and the good self in another. But over time, those lines blur. What if your cruelty was born from pain? What if your jealousy hides a longing for connection? What if your lies were survival? When you confront this hidden version, not with shame but with curiosity, something strange happens. It begins to dissolve. Not because it was defeated, but because it was understood. You start to realize this part of you isn't your enemy. It's your mirror. And here lies the final twist. The person you pretend not to be might actually be the most honest part of you. It's the one who tells the truth when you're tired of pretending. The one who cries when no one's watching. The one who says the thing everyone's thinking but won't say out loud. The one who dares to feel even when it's ugly. That self isn't a mistake. It's a message, a whisper beneath the mask, saying, I'm still here. I've always been here. So ask yourself, who are you when no one's looking? And more importantly, why are you hiding it? Because if that person holds even a piece of the truth, you'll never be whole until you stop pretending they don't exist. There is a kind of light that doesn't reveal anything. It doesn't warm the skin or chase away the dark. It doesn't create contrast, doesn't shape the world in silhouettes. It simply exists, pure, perfect, and indifferent. No shadows. Follow it, because nothing resists it. And in this strange illumination, the world becomes eerily flat. Everything is seen, but nothing is understood. This is the light that casts no shadow, a paradox of clarity without meaning, visibility without truth. We are taught to seek the light, to find answers, understanding, purpose. We chase knowledge, like moths spiraling toward a flame. And when we find it, we assume the world will finally make sense, that pain will dissolve in reason, that questions will collapse into certainty, that with enough light, we will see everything. But what happens when we reach that light and nothing changes? What happens when the room is fully lit and yet you still don't know where you are? You stare at the walls. You see every detail, the cracks, the grain of the wood, the dust in the corners, and still you feel lost, not because things are hidden, but because they no longer carry weight. It's as if the light itself has erased the need for shadow, and in doing so, it has erased the soul of the room. Truth, when stripped of mystery, can become sterile. There's a part of you that needs the unknown to feel alive. The shadow gives depth. The dark makes the light sacred. Without contrast, there is no tension, no beauty, no choice, just a blank world, endlessly visible, forever unchallenged. Imagine a world where every emotion is explained, every behavior mapped, every spiritual longing reduced to circuitry and chemistry. Imagine a future where consciousness is decoded, dreams are catalogued, and love is just dopamine dancing in predictable rhythms. Would you feel enlightened or hollow? This is the trap of the light that casts no shadow. It promises illumination, but at the cost of wonder. It offers answers, but kills the questioner. It exposes everything, but leaves you feeling unseen. And yet, we keep moving toward it, because we are afraid of the dark, afraid of what hides there, afraid that the unknown will hurt us, undo us, reveal some truth we cannot bear. But the truth is, sometimes it's the absence of shadow that's more terrifying. Sometimes it's the brightness that blinds. A light that reveals everything offers no refuge, no quiet corner for grief, no sacred space for uncertainty. It burns without pause, and you begin to vanish in its glow, flattened, emptied, named before you can even speak. You become a character in someone else's clarity. But here's a secret. Real light does cast shadows. True illumination doesn't erase mystery, it deepens it. It doesn't demand you see everything. It teaches you to look, to feel, to ask, to doubt. And in doing so, it brings you closer to the living pulse of things. The kind of light that matters most is the one that reveals just enough for you to take the next step and leaves the rest in sacred darkness. So beware the light that casts no shadow. It may look like truth, but it lacks meaning. It may offer vision, but not insight. And it may let you see everything, except yourself. Have you ever heard yourself speak and realized it didn't sound like you? There's a voice inside your head, the one you silently use to think, reason, rehearse conversations, and narrate your own life. But where did it come from? Who does it actually belong to? This is the paradox of the voice that isn't yours. You assume that because you hear it in your own mind, it must be an authentic expression of your identity. But think carefully. That voice, the tone it takes, the words it chooses, the language it speaks, was shaped by forces far outside your control. Your parents' words, a teacher's criticisms, a friend's offhand remark, a culture's expectations. All of these layered themselves into the architecture of your thoughts until they formed something that sounded like you, but may not actually be you. It's unsettling to consider that what you call your inner monologue may be an echo chamber of other people's ideas, a borrowed voice, inherited and stitched together from fragments of influence. You didn't choose the language you think in. You didn't design the phrases your brain leans on when under stress. You didn't even consciously shape your deepest fears. They were given to you, whispered through the cracks of growing up, and yet now they speak with your voice. Even stranger, you often argue with this voice. You correct it. You feel hurt by it. You try to ignore it. What does that say about you? If the voice is yours, why do you disagree with it so often? If it's not yours, then who exactly are you listening to? It's like living with a narrator who's unreliable, yet intimately familiar. One moment it comforts you, the next it questions your worth. And somehow, you accept this voice as part of your identity. But maybe it's not. Maybe it's a program, running silently, repeating old beliefs that no longer fit the person you're becoming. There's something deeply existential about realizing the self that thinks might not be the self that chooses, that your thoughts can betray you, that your voice can lie. And here's the real twist. If you can observe the voice in your head, if you can listen to it, then who is the one doing the listening? Isn't that awareness the truer you? The quiet presence behind the noise? Maybe the voice isn't the self. Maybe it's just an instrument the self uses, badly at times. Maybe your thoughts are not facts. Maybe your voice isn't the truth. Maybe the most honest part of you is the part that simply watches. Because if your voice can be shaped by the world, then it can also be reshaped. If it's just a pattern, it can be rewritten. And in that quiet realization is the beginning of freedom. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who hears them. So next time that voice whispers something that makes you feel small, pause. Ask, whose voice is this really? And then listen deeper. Not to the noise, but to the stillness beneath it. That stillness, that awareness, that's you. You stumble across it by accident. A door, unmarked, unguarded, half open, hanging strangely in a wall that shouldn't be there. It doesn't creak when you push it. It doesn't resist. It welcomes, like it knows you, like it's been waiting. But what lies beyond is not the place you left. It's not quite the past, and not quite a dream. It's a place that looks like your childhood bedroom, but smells like someone else's memory. The walls flicker between paint colors you remember and ones you don't. There's a book on the table that you swear you never read, but the pages are dog-eared exactly where you would have stopped. And a coat, hanging on the hook, your old coat, but it fits wrong, as if time tailored it for a different version of you. This is the door that leads back in, not back in time. Not back to where you were, but back into the self you left behind, into the questions you avoided, into the hollow you buried so deep even your reflections forgot to look for it. It's not nostalgia, it's confrontation, because what greets you on the other side is not a replica of your past, but an unfinished thought, a version of you that kept growing in silence, in shadows, while you pressed forward, while you chose careers, relationships, identities, while you decided who to be. This other you never stopped wondering who you were. And now, standing in this strange, breathing memory, you begin to feel it. The weight of unanswered questions. Why did you choose that path? Why did you let that part of you die? Why did you leave when you knew something sacred was calling you to stay? The door didn't bring you back to a place. It brought you back to the very moment you turned away from yourself. You tried to speak, to justify, but there's no one to answer to. Only shelves filled with things you abandoned. Notebooks filled with ideas you never pursued. Letters you wrote but never sent. Sketches of lives that were meant to be lived in silence. You reach out to touch them, but your hands pass through. They are not souvenirs. They are echoes, remnants of unrealized selves. And that's when it hits you. The door never opened outward. It was always waiting inward. Every time you felt a pang of loss for no clear reason. Every time you stood in a room full of people and still felt missing. Every dream you woke from, haunted not by what happened, but by what never did. The door was always there. You just weren't ready to go back in. And yet here you are. Not to fix anything, not to reclaim what was lost, but to acknowledge that it was real, that you were real, that the pieces you left behind still matter, even if they never became anything more than a question. You do not need to relive the pain. You only need to witness it. When you walk back through the door, nothing outside has changed. The world carries on, oblivious. But something inside you shifts. You are no longer merely the path you followed. You are also the rooms you once closed, the thoughts you never answered, the selves you once were brave enough to imagine. The door is still there, behind you. Maybe it always will be. Maybe it isn't a door at all, but a mirror disguised as an invitation. A return not to where you were, but to who you could have been. There's something eerie about looking into a mirror. Not because of what it shows, but because of what it doesn't forget. Imagine a mirror that remembers every version of you that's ever stood before it. Not just the person you are now, but every fleeting expression, every hidden breakdown, every fake smile, every whispered rehearsal before an interview or apology. Imagine that mirror silently holding each version of you like layers stacked upon layers, endlessly watching without judgment, without the courtesy of forgetting. But here's the twist. You've changed, haven't you? You cut your hair, you hardened your heart, you learned to pretend better. And yet, this mirror remembers the child who stood in front of it with toothpaste on their chin. It remembers the version of you who doubted everything. The one who rehearsed saying, "I'm fine," so many times that it started to sound convincing. Now, imagine looking into that mirror again. What are you really seeing? Just your reflection? Or are you seeing a projection built on every previous moment it has captured? Could it be that what you're looking at isn't the present you, but a haunting composite of your past selves, stitched together by silent memory? This paradox asks, if a mirror could remember everything, would your reflection still feel like you? Or would it become something alien, something more truthful than your own memory? Here's where it gets uncomfortable. We often forget ourselves. We rewrite our pasts, bend memories to survive, omit the parts we're ashamed of. But the mirror wouldn't. The mirror would remember the fight you pretended didn't happen, the tears you wiped away quickly, the moment you looked at yourself and didn't recognize who you'd become. It's not about supernatural horror. It's about the psychological unease of knowing that something might preserve the truths you choose to forget. And here's where your mind starts to spiral. What if your reflection is subtly shifting? Not to show who you are now, but to remind you who you used to be. What if that distant sadness in your eyes isn't yours today, but a ghost of a time when it was? You see, a mirror that remembers forces us to confront a chilling thought. Maybe we are not who we think we are. Maybe we are just echoes of ourselves, constantly being watched by the only witness that never forgets. The reflection becomes less of a feedback loop and more of a frozen archive, a silent observer of your psychological evolution. You stare into it, and it doesn't just reflect light. It reflects time, emotion, regret, change. So next time you're alone, standing in front of a mirror, ask yourself this: what version of you is staring back? And more importantly, does it remember something you've forgotten? There's someone who walks just beside your life. They don't speak, they don't interfere, but they follow closely. You feel their presence sometimes, like déjà vu's shadow. A glance in the mirror that doesn't quite reflect who you are. A voice in your head that feels almost like your own, but not quite. You can't name them, but they know your name. They know your habits, your hesitations, your desires. They know the decisions you didn't make, the paths you didn't take, the lives you didn't live. This is the stranger you almost became. Not a fictional self, not a distant what if, but a real version, crafted from moments you ignored, instincts you silenced, doors you didn't open. They were born in seconds, in glances, in all the quiet times you said no to yourself, or worse, maybe later. They live not in your past, but in the dimension that almost was. And they haunt you, not with malice, but with familiarity. Sometimes they appear when you least expect it. In the way you stare too long at someone doing something you wish you had dared. In the way certain music feels like it belongs to a life you never lived. In dreams where you wake up with someone else's confidence or pain or joy. and it feels so real that waking feels like loss. This stranger, this unlived version of you is not angry. They are patient. They walk parallel to your choices, echoing silently. It could have been different, not better, not worse, just different. And this is not regret. It's recognition. You almost became them, and they almost became you. Think back. The moment you hesitated at the edge of a new beginning. The time you swallowed your truth to maintain peace. The way you molded yourself to fit in, to be liked, to be safe. Each of those moments spun a thread, and while your current self kept weaving forward, that thread split off, and kept weaving too, just in another direction. Now imagine all those threads forming a figure made of missed chances and repressed truths. A figure with your eyes but someone else's fire. A version of you that doesn't wait for permission, that doesn't overthink, that doesn't shrink. They are not better than you, but they are unburdened by the masks you learn to wear, unburdened by the comfort of compromise. They made different sacrifices, faced different storms, and yet, in some fundamental way, they are still you, still built from your essence, just directed elsewhere. And here's the strangest part. You're their stranger too. They sometimes wonder what it would have been like to have your calm, your caution, your depth. They imagine the warmth you preserved by not chasing fire, the relationships you maintained, the stability you built. To them, you are the path not taken. And in some quiet part of their mind, they ache for the life you created. So perhaps the stranger is not a ghost or a warning or a mistake. Perhaps they're simply a reminder that you are not one self but many, that your identity is not fixed but fluid, that even now a new version of you waits in the wings, whispering through hesitation, try again, that it's never too late to become the stranger you almost became. And when you pass by a mirror next time, look closely. That flash of something, unspoken in your eyes, that's them, that's you, not lost, not gone, just waiting to be chosen again. And if you listen carefully, they're still walking beside you. Ever had a thought and wondered where it came from? Maybe it was strange, maybe it was beautiful, or maybe it was dark, so foreign it didn't even feel like you. That's where this paradox begins. The thought you didn't think. We like to believe we control our minds, that every idea, every intention, every whisper in our brain is a product of us. But if that's true, why do thoughts sometimes appear out of nowhere? Why do we imagine things we never wanted to? Why do we feel surprise at our own mind? This paradox challenges the very foundation of identity. If a thought arises without your will, without your awareness, without even your permission, did you really think it? Here's where it gets deeper. Let's say you're walking down a street and suddenly you think something absurd, like jumping into a fountain or shouting a random word. You didn't plan to think it, it just showed up. Scientists call this an intrusive thought. But here's the twist. Intrusive or not, the thought is yours. Your brain made it. But if your brain can generate ideas without your consent, then who's really in control? It's like finding a note on your desk in your own handwriting. But you don't remember writing it. It's familiar and foreign all at once. Now imagine this happening every second. Thousands of micro-thoughts rise, blink, and fade, most without your conscious mind ever noticing. The majority of your thinking might be happening without you. This leads us to a disturbing yet fascinating question. Are you the thinker or the observer? Maybe your mind is more like a garden, where thoughts grow like wild plants. Some are cultivated, others just appear, scattered by winds you don't understand. Maybe the act of thinking isn't about creation, but selection. You don't invent every thought, you just notice the ones that matter. And what about thoughts that feel completely alien, like a dream that isn't yours, like a voice that doesn't belong? Could it be a glitch, a hidden memory, a signal from a part of your mind that exists beyond your conscious self? Or, and here's the haunting possibility, could it be a different version of you thinking it, a parallel you, a past you, a potential you? Sometimes we filter those strange thoughts out, dismiss them, bury them. But the paradox reminds us, even the thoughts we disown came from somewhere within. So maybe the thought you didn't think is actually the most honest one, the one unedited by fear, untouched by ego, a raw fragment of your deeper self breaking the surface for just a second before sinking back into the dark. You didn't think it, but maybe it revealed you, and that changes everything. There's something eerie about the idea of being watched, especially by something that only opens when you close your eyes. Imagine a room with no windows, no doors, no sound, just stillness. You sit in the center, alone, your heartbeat the only rhythm in the silence. But you feel it. Something is watching. You blink, and that's when it opens. This is the paradox. An eye that only sees when you don't. A watcher that's only awake when you're not when you sleep. No, it's not that simple. It activates when you momentarily drop your guard, even for a second. When your eyelids shut, when the world disappears for just a blink, that's when it observes. How do you prove you're being watched by something that only exists when you're blind to it? The eye that watches you. Blink doesn't reside in the realm of the ordinary. It's a metaphor, and possibly something more. It could be the embodiment of self-awareness, the part of your mind that only sees itself when you're not consciously trying. Or maybe it's external, an echo of the observer effect, the quantum strangeness that suggests observation alters reality. In this case, non-observation invites a deeper kind of seeing. You might wonder, what does it see? Not your appearance, not your gestures. It sees your intentions, your unconscious truths, the secrets you hide not from others, but from yourself. It watches the way your body twitches when your mind tries to lie. It sees the flicker of fear before courage steps in. It witnesses the real you, and it records. Every blink, every moment of blindness is like a frame in a film you're not directing. It compiles its own version of you, an unseen biography written in darkness. And when your eyes are open again, it's already gone, leaving you none the wiser, yet subtly shaped by what it saw. Think of how many times you've blinked today. Thousands. How many moments were stolen from your awareness? How much could an intelligent eye, timeless and tireless, learn from those fragments? The paradox deepens when you try to confront it. You stare in the mirror, forcing your eyes to stay open, daring it to appear. But you'll never catch it in action, just as you can't watch yourself blink. It's always a frame too late, a thought too early, like trying to catch a shadow in total light. And still, you feel it, not in fear necessarily, but in that quiet, tickling intuition that something knows you better than you know yourself, an invisible gaze that exists between your perceptions. It doesn't chase or trap you. It waits, patient, silent, watching. Maybe it's your conscience. Maybe it's memory. Maybe it's something older, a force embedded in reality, designed to monitor the blind spots of sentient beings. But ask yourself this: what if it's watching now? You blink. It sees. 1. What happens when your mind isn't thinking? It's a question that sounds simple until you actually try to answer it. At first glance, the mind feels like a machine of thoughts, a river that never stops flowing, from one idea to the next, one fear to the next, one memory to another. But beneath that constant noise, what if there's something even stranger happening? A mind that exists even when it's not producing thought. Can you be conscious without thinking? Can there be awareness without the voice in your head? Picture this. You're sitting quietly, no internal chatter, no commentary, just stillness. And yet, you're there, not gone, not asleep, fully present. The mind hasn't disappeared, but it's no longer thinking in the way you're used to. This is the paradox. The mind doesn't need to think to exist, and sometimes thought can actually get in the way of true awareness. You are more than your thoughts. But that idea alone can shatter you, because if you're not the thinker, then who are you? Thoughts often feel like proof of existence. Cogito, ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. But what if Descartes was wrong? What if the truest form of being isn't found in thought, but in stillness? What if thought is just the surface, and the real you is what watches quietly from below? The paradox deepens when you realize that most of your thoughts aren't even yours. They arise on their own. You don't decide your next thought. It appears unsolicited, often unwanted. Try to sit in silence for just a few moments, and you'll see. The mind thinks on its own. So who's really in control? Now imagine the you that watches all this, the silent observer behind every word, behind every emotion, behind every worry. That version of you doesn't think. It witnesses thinking. It's the mind that isn't thinking. And once you notice it, even for a second, something changes. You realize that the mind is not a machine running your life. It's a lens, and it can be focused or unfocused. It can be cloudy with thought or crystal clear with presence. But here's the twist. The more you chase silence, the louder your thoughts become. The more you try to force the mind to stop thinking, the more chaotic it gets. The only way to glimpse the mind that isn't thinking is to let go completely. No effort, no grasping, just awareness, like a mirror reflecting everything, but holding on to nothing. And in that state, something unsettling may creep in. If the mind can exist without thought, what does that mean for your identity? You've spent a lifetime building yourself out of thoughts, stories, memories, beliefs, but in this strange silence, none of that remains. There's just space, empty, alive, aware. Is that still you, or are you something else entirely when the mind stops? Some say this is the closest we can get to truth. A mind that isn't thinking is no longer distorting reality. It's seeing it directly, without judgment, without filters, without the constant need to narrate. It doesn't solve your problems. It doesn't explain the universe. But it reminds you that thinking isn't the same as being, and that the deepest parts of you exist far beyond words. So the next time your mind won't quiet down, remember this paradox. Your truest self may be hiding in the silence between thoughts. The part of you that never needed to think at all. There's a smile you wear, not for others, but for yourself. A reflex, a mask, a small curve of the lips meant to convince you that everything's okay. But here's the strange part. Sometimes that smile appears even when your heart feels like it's crumbling. Even when your thoughts are dark, your soul heavy, your body exhausted from pretending. That smile shows up, not out of joy, but out of habit. This is the paradox of the smile that lies to itself. It's a smile born not from happiness, but from survival, a signal to the world that you're fine, while a deeper part of you quietly whispers, I'm not. And stranger still, the one person that smile is trying to fool is you. We learn to smile through pain. We're told to stay positive, to fake it till you make it, to wear resilience like armor. And over time, the line between pretending and believing blurs. You begin to believe your own expression. You look in the mirror and see someone who seems okay, but beneath that surface, your mind tells another story. The lie isn't malicious, it's protective. It's the psyche trying to shield itself from the weight of its own sadness. But what happens when the mask becomes indistinguishable from the face? The paradox deepens. Because now, you don't just smile to fool others. You smile to avoid facing yourself. That small familiar expression becomes a kind of hypnosis. A shield against introspection, against feeling too much. You tell yourself you're okay until the truth becomes harder and harder to access. And yet, that very same smile can save you. There's evidence in psychology that the mere act of smiling, real or fake, can trick the brain into releasing dopamine and serotonin. So maybe the lie helps. Maybe for a while, pretending you're okay makes you a little more okay. But the danger lies in never taking the mask off. Because if you wear the smile too long, you start to lose track of what's real and what's performance. Have you ever caught yourself smiling in a moment of deep despair and wondered why? Where did that come from? Who was it for? That's the eerie beauty of this paradox. The smile that lies to itself doesn't need an audience. It performs for you. It's your own brain's attempt to rewrite reality, to offer a comforting illusion, when the truth feels unbearable. But illusions are fragile. Eventually, cracks appear. The smile feels forced. The eyes stop playing along. The disconnect becomes undeniable. And in that moment, the question emerges. If I can lie to myself with a smile, what else have I convinced myself of? What if entire parts of your personality are just emotional reflexes you've mistaken for truth? That smile, once comforting, begins to haunt you, because it becomes a symbol, not of strength, but of avoidance. So what's the solution? It's not to stop smiling. It's to know when the smile is real, to recognize when it comes from a place of healing and when it's hiding something that needs to be felt. Because the truth is, you don't need to lie to yourself to survive. Sometimes, the most courageous thing you can do is frown, to sit with the pain, to let the mask fall. And when the real smile returns, soft, unforced, genuine, you'll know the difference. You'll feel it not just on your face, but deep in your bones. The smile that lies to itself may be part of the journey, but it's not where the journey ends. Have you ever remembered something so vividly that it felt real, only to realize later that it never actually happened? A house you swore you'd visited, a conversation you can quote word for word, a face that feels familiar, though you've never met. The memory is detailed, specific, it carries emotion, and yet it doesn't belong to you. Welcome to the paradox of the memory you never had. This isn't just a mental glitch or a case of déjà vu. It's deeper, stranger. Imagine a memory existing inside your mind, fully formed without a known origin. Where did it come from? Why does it feel more real than some of your actual past? Is it something your brain invented? Or is it something it received? What if your mind isn't just a recorder of your experiences, but also a receiver, tuned into the collective noise of human thought, trauma, and dreams? There are theories, disturbing ones, that suggest memory may not be entirely bound to individual consciousness, that we might sometimes catch fragments of other lives, other timelines, even other selves, not as full downloads, but as impressions, glimpses, shadows wearing the costume of memory. It gets more chilling when you realize this doesn't feel like an error. It feels intentional, like your mind needs this memory for something, as if it has been installed with purpose. You start to question, is this borrowed memory a warning, a reminder, a leftover from a version of you that didn't survive? Maybe you dream about drowning, but you've never been near the ocean. Maybe you feel the loss of someone you've never met. Maybe you can picture a city you've never visited, right down to the sound of its streets. Why? Is your brain just making it up, or is something leaking in through time, space, or the cracks in your own identity? And if one memory doesn't belong to you, how many others might also be imposters? Think about how much of your identity is built on memory. Your decisions, beliefs, fears, all scaffolded by what you remember. But if even one memory is false, the structure begins to shake. You're no longer the person who went through those experiences. You're someone who believes they did. The paradox cuts deeper. If a false memory shapes your real self, is it really false? Let's say a memory made you kind, or closed you off, or taught you to protect yourself. Even if it never happened, its effect did. So which matters more, the truth of the event or the truth of its impact? The memory you never had is no less powerful than the ones you trust. And maybe, just maybe, the mind doesn't care whether it's true or not. It only cares whether it's useful, whether it helps you survive, evolve, or cope. Or maybe the mind doesn't care, and you're just a passenger inside a constantly shifting narrative, piecing together a self from moments both real and imagined. So next time a strange memory drifts through your mind, don't be so quick to dismiss it. Ask instead, who does this memory belong to, and why did it choose me? Have you ever felt something so specific, so piercing, that no word could describe it? A sensation that lives somewhere between nostalgia and dread, between warmth and loss, a feeling with no label, no shape, no name. That's the paradox of the feeling without a name. We live in a world obsessed with definitions. Emotions are categorized, diagnosed, and dissected into lists. Happiness, sadness, anger, fear. But what happens when what you feel doesn't fit any of those? When it hovers at the edge of language like a ghost, you can sense but never see. Some cultures have words for emotions we don't name. Saudade in Portuguese, a deep yearning for something that may never return. Mono no aware in Japanese, the gentle sadness of impermanence. Hirith in Welsh, a longing for a home that may never have existed. But even those fall short of this paradox, because sometimes the feeling is so uniquely yours that no word could ever reach it. It's not just emotion, it's memory, imagination, instinct, woven into a single flicker that disappears the moment you try to grasp it. Where does it come from? Perhaps it's the residue of forgotten experiences, past lives echoing in the nervous system, leaving behind fragments we don't recognize but still feel. Or maybe it's the emotional version of déjà vu, not remembering a place, but remembering a state of being your conscious mind has never experienced. And here's the strange twist. The moment you try to explain the feeling, it slips through. Your fingers, like trying to describe a color no one's ever seen. The words flatten it, reduce it, so you stay quiet. You carry it with you like a secret no one else could understand. Not because they don't want to, but because they simply can't. This feeling becomes a kind of hidden language between you and yourself. And yet, paradoxically, it connects us. Because even if our unnamed feelings are different, the experience of having them, the ache of knowing something wordless lives inside you, is universal. Everyone walks around with emotional ghosts that haven't yet found a voice. Maybe that's why art exists. Music, film, poetry, not to label emotions, but to give them a shape. A mirror for the feelings language has failed. You see a painting or hear a song and think, yes, that's it. Not because it gave you a word, but because it recognized you. And still, the question lingers. If a feeling has no name, is it less real or more? Does naming something give it power or take power away? Is the mystery itself part of what makes these unnamed feelings feel more alive, more sacred? Maybe they're not meant to be solved. Maybe they're reminders that not everything about being human can or should be defined. So the next time you feel something that refuses to be named, don't rush to silence it. Don't force it into a box it doesn't belong in. Sit with it. Let it live. Let it teach you something language never could. Some feelings were never meant to be understood, only felt, and that's what makes them unforgettable. Every story we know, every journey, every life, has a beginning, a middle, and an end. But what if the end was just the beginning disguised? Welcome to the paradox of the ending that starts again. It begins, fittingly, with endings. Endings feel final. A full stop. A curtain call. But look closer, and you'll see that endings are never truly alone. Every time something ends, something else begins. A breakup ends a relationship and begins a new sense of identity. A death ends a life and begins grief, memory, or even belief in what lies beyond. Even the universe plays this trick. Scientists believe the cosmos might not expand forever. It could collapse and restart in a cycle called the Big Bounce. If true, the end of this universe might just spark the beginning of another. But let's bring this closer. Imagine you're reading the last page of a book. The words come to a close. You close the cover. But in that act, as your fingers press the back of the book, something new begins. A reflection, a decision, maybe even the pull to read it again or pass it to someone else. The paradox is this. An ending is never an end in isolation. It creates what comes next. Now think about time. We imagine time as a line, moving forward. But what if it loops? What if the moment you reach the end, you start again, not because of chance, but because it has to happen? This idea echoes in dreams. You try to escape. You reach the edge, but it leads you back to the beginning. Over and over, like a circle that hides its own shape. And maybe that's what life is too. A spiral, not a straight path. Each ending leads to a new version of the same story, evolved, rewritten, but echoing the same patterns. In philosophy, this idea touches reincarnation, karma, legacy, even the concept that your choices, repeated endlessly, define not just your life, but your eternity. It also challenges how we define finality. If everything continues, even in altered form, is anything ever truly over? Here's the unsettling part. You might not even notice the start hidden in your ending. It could be subtle. A glance, a silence, a choice. You think you've reached the finish line, but in reality, you've opened a door. The room might look familiar, but it isn't the same. Maybe that's why we fear endings, not because they're empty, but because they're full of potential, unpredictable, unwritten. So when something ends, a phase, a connection, a belief, don't look for closure. Look for the spark, because the paradox whispers, nothing ends. It just shifts. Every ending starts again. And this cycle, might be the most eternal truth of all. There's a space inside your mind you've probably never noticed. Not the thoughts themselves, but the gaps between them. The stillness that lives between the noise. The silence between your thoughts. At first glance, silence seems empty, devoid of meaning, just the absence of thinking. But linger there for a moment, and something eerie begins to unfold. The silence isn't blank. It's watching. In the milliseconds between your thoughts, you are not thinking, not speaking, not imagining, yet you still are. What is that space? And who, or what, is experiencing it? You may think your thoughts define you, that if you strip them away, you'd be nothing. But the silence reveals the opposite. You're still there, even when no thoughts are present. Which leads to an unsettling question. If you exist without thought, are you the thinker, or are you something that witnesses thought? This space is terrifying because it holds no content. You can't grasp it or narrate it. The moment you try to describe it, you're back to thinking again, pulling yourself away from it. It's like trying to look at your own eyes without a mirror. And yet, this silence is more you than the thoughts themselves. Thoughts come and go. They contradict each other. They're often involuntary. You don't choose to think. Thinking just happens. But the silence, it's always there, waiting, unchanging, a hidden constant beneath your mental storm. Some say, this space is where consciousness lives. Others say it's where the illusion of self begins to dissolve, that in that silence, the you think you are disappears, and something far more mysterious remains. But here's the paradox. This silence seems to contain you, but you can never truly enter it. Every time you realize it's there, it vanishes. The observer disrupts what it tries to observe. You chase the silence. But the moment you say, there it is, the silence is gone, replaced by the thought of silence. It's a space that cannot be filled, and yet it holds everything. What if this gap, this in-between, is the true source of awareness? What if your entire identity is just static layered on top of it, like noise interrupting an ancient signal? We fill our lives with sound, distraction, internal commentary. But sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet and your thoughts start to slow, the silence creeps in. And in that brief moment, you sense something profound. You are not your thoughts. You are the space they pass through. And once you glimpse that, you can't unsee it. You begin to notice the silence more often. Between words in a conversation, between breaths, in the pause after a question, it's always there. Subtle, unnerving, infinite. Maybe that's why most people are afraid of silence. It's not the quiet that scares them. It's the confrontation with something deeper, something formless, something that doesn't play by the rules of identity, something that remembers when you forget who you are. So next time your mind goes quiet, don't rush to fill the void. Listen to the silence between your thoughts. not with ears, but with awareness, because what you find there might not be nothing. It might be the only thing that's real. There's a version of you that never stopped drawing, one that didn't abandon the piano, one that confessed that feeling, one that turned left instead of right. Somewhere, in the dust behind each decision you made, lies a life untouched. Still breathing, still watching, still waiting. We speak of regret as if it's something to be healed, but regret is not just about choices made, it's about paths unwalked, lives unlived, selves unborn. It is the subtle grief for the you who almost existed. And sometimes that grief whispers louder than memory. You feel it in quiet moments, in dreams that don't make sense but feel oddly familiar, in the sudden ache of an old song that was never your favorite, in places you've never been that somehow feel like home. That is the ghost of a life you didn't live. We like to imagine we are the sum of our choices. But what if we're also haunted by the sum of our non-choices? Every moment you hesitated, every fear that held you back, every maybe later that turned into never. They didn't disappear. They curled into quiet corners of your mind and watched your life unfold from the sidelines. And maybe, just maybe, they're still there. Not as failures, but as echoes. You may have married someone else, lived in another city, spoken a different language, breathed under different skies. And though this life, the one you're in, is the only one you can touch, it's not the only one you feel. Some people call this the multiverse. Others call it imagination. But whatever name you give it, the ache remains. There's a version of you that almost was, and they are so close, you can sometimes hear their heartbeat in your silence. This life, your life, is not wrong, but it is partial. Because every choice is also a closure. Every road taken means 1,000 others left behind, and in those hidden lives, things happened you will never know. You missed meetings that never occurred. You avoided pain that never had to heal. You also missed joys that might have broken. You open in ways you can't imagine. But here's the twist. Just because you didn't live those lives doesn't mean they didn't shape you. You carry their weight, their flavor, their residue. You are not a single thread but a tapestry of almosts. And somewhere inside you, the painter still paints. The dancer still dances. The rebel still rebels. The lover still risks it all. They never left you. They became you. So the next time you feel the sting of paths not taken, don't rush to bury it with logic or guilt. Let it ache. Let it speak. Because that ache is not your enemy. It's your reminder that you are vast, that the possible never truly dies, that somewhere inside, 1,000 versions of you still breathe, and maybe, just maybe, it's not too late to become one of them. Have you ever encountered a question so strange, so persistent, that it almost felt alive? A question that doesn't just seek an answer, but changes the shape of your mind while waiting for one. That's what this paradox explores. The question that doesn't just come from you, but turns around and begins to think you. It begins subtly. You're sitting quietly, maybe lost in thought, and a strange inquiry floats into your consciousness. It's not about something external like math or weather or news. It's personal. It's invasive. It sounds like, am I really the one thinking this? At first it seems like any other moment of curiosity, but then it loops. It refuses to go away. It repeats, not to be solved, but to be experienced. And in time, it stops feeling like a thought you had, and more like a presence observing you having thoughts. That's the paradox. You're the thinker, but suddenly, you feel like the one being thought. It's a reversal of roles. The question doesn't wait passively for you to solve it. It takes on a life of its own. It burrows deep into your awareness and begins to change how you perceive everything. It watches you from inside. You don't just ask it, it asks you back. What is this strange force? It might be compared to a mirror, but one that reflects not your appearance, but your inner dialogue. Every time you approach it with logic, it slips away into abstraction. Every time you try to ignore it, it flares up in the quiet moments. It doesn't want to be answered. It wants to undo your sense of control. And that's what makes it so powerful. Because most of us live under the illusion that we own our thoughts, that we are the source, the conductor, the center of the stream. But some questions, like what is thinking, or where was I before I was aware of being me, unravel that certainty. And if you stare too long into that unraveling, you start to realize you're not having thoughts. Thoughts are having you. It's disorienting, even frightening. But there's a strange kind of clarity in it too, because it reveals how little of what we think we are is actually stable. Language gives us tools to navigate the world, but some questions shatter those tools. They don't want answers. They want surrender. They want you to admit you don't really know what you is, that you've built an identity out of remembered stories, echoed voices, inherited beliefs. And when that identity starts to crumble under the pressure of a question you can't silence, what's left? A raw kind of awareness. The paradox here isn't just about the question itself. It's about what it turns you into, a witness, a listener, a space in which thought occurs, but no longer has a clear source. And in that space, the boundaries blur between the one who asks and the one who is asked. So next time a question visits you in the quiet, don't try to conquer it. Try to feel it. Notice how it watches you back, how it exposes your assumptions, how it lingers, not to be solved, but to be lived. Some questions don't lead to answers. Some questions are the answer, because in trying to understand them, you discover that what you are is not the thinker. You are the thought being thought. There's a peculiar silence in the future, not the silence of peace, but of absence, not of tranquility, but of erasure. Imagine walking into a place you were always meant to reach, only to find that it no longer recognizes your existence. No footprints in the soil, no whispers in the air, no echoes of your name in the distant hum of time. The future has arrived, but it forgot to bring you with it. You were told your choices would carve the path forward, that your dreams, your struggle, your time would accumulate, like layered sediment forming the ground of what's next. But what if the future doesn't remember the hands that built it? What if it's a corridor of doors you never opened, timelines you never touched, and lives you never lived? You stand at the threshold, waiting for something that no longer waits for you. This is not regret. Regret assumes memory. This is dislocation, being out of sync with what was once yours. You see technologies shaped by thoughts you never had, societies moved by values you never shared, and a world humming a language you never spoke. You were part of the blueprint, and now you're not even in the margins. Perhaps the future didn't forget you maliciously. Perhaps it simply reorganized itself. A minor fluctuation, a missed opportunity, a conversation never had, a decision delayed by a day. Time, you see, is cruel in its sensitivity. 1,000 potential futures collapse for every second lived, and in one of them, you are central. But in this one, you're the afterthought that never arrived. Worse still is the suspicion that you were never remembered in the first place. That history had a hole where you thought your contribution would be. that the narrative moved on before you stepped into the scene. It's as if the script had a role written for you, but the ink faded before it could be read, and yet something strange stirs in this forgetting. A freedom. If the future does not remember you, you are no longer beholden to its expectations. You are a ghost unchained by prophecy, a traveler no longer bound to the roads drawn by others. When the story forgets the character becomes the author. When destiny dissolves, something raw and terrifying emerges, choice, unfiltered by promise. Still, the ache remains. The quiet grief of knowing that the world moved on without you, that the stars aligned for someone else, that your shadow never fell across the field you once dreamed of harvesting. But then, what is more human than being misplaced in time? What is more honest than standing in a future that forgot your name, whispering it back into the void? Because maybe forgetting is not the end. Maybe it is the beginning of remembering yourself. There are places in your mind that you've never seen, yet somehow they feel familiar. A staircase that leads nowhere. A hallway bathed in blue light. A city skyline beneath two moons. You wake up knowing the texture of its walls, the scent, in its air, the path to a door you've never touched. And the strangest part, it feels more real than some places you've actually been. This is the paradox of the place you've only dreamed. You didn't create it consciously. It wasn't planted by memory, and yet it exists, vivid, structured, sometimes recurring, within the labyrinth of your mind. It obeys rules. It has gravity, weather, rhythm. A logic that makes no sense and yet feels intuitively right. How is it possible to long for a place you've never visited? Dreams are supposed to be fleeting, nonsense stitched together by a sleeping brain. But some locations feel more than symbolic. They feel anchored, revisited across years, reconstructed with startling detail. Not random, but remembered. So where do these dream places come from? One theory suggests they're fragments, composites of sights, emotions, and half-forgotten memories rearranged by the subconscious. But that doesn't explain the impossible geography, the multi-layered architecture, the cities built of symbols that never existed in waking life. Another theory goes further. It proposes that your mind may be tuning into frequencies, realities or dimensions that exist beyond our perception. That dreams aren't hallucinations, but glimpses through a crack in the wall. Places we can only access when consciousness loosens its grip. That idea invites a chilling question. What if these places are real but unreachable? You remember them like homesickness without a source. A sense of belonging to something you can never return to. And what does that say about identity? If your heart aches for a land you've never touched, does that make it less meaningful? Or more? And here's where the paradox deepens. Imagine waking up one day and stepping into one of those dream places. You recognize every corner, every detail, exactly as it appeared in sleep. Would you trust it? Would you accept it as real? Or would you question whether you're awake at all? And if you never leave, if your mind chooses the dream over the waking world, what does that mean for your sense of truth? Maybe these places represent more than environments. Maybe they're emotional landscapes, symbols for who you could have been or who you once were in a version of reality you've forgotten. Maybe the longing is not for a place at all, but for a self untethered by rules, a self that remembers something this life forced you to forget. So next time you wake up in that half second of stillness, Before the alarm, before your name returns, pay attention. Listen to the architecture of that place. Walk its roads. Feel its impossible familiarity. It may not be real, but it's not random either. And sometimes, the places you've only dreamed are the ones that know you best. There's a strange weight in the decisions we never made, not the ones we regret, but the ones that almost happened. The choice you didn't make, the road you didn't take, the version of yourself that could have been, but wasn't. What if every moment of indecision created a fracture in time? Imagine a split in the timeline, one where you said yes instead of no, stayed instead of leaving, spoke instead of remaining silent. That other you, the one that made a different decision, continues living in some quiet parallel, untouched by your current reality, and yet haunting it all the same. Because here's the paradox. The choice you didn't make can shape you just as powerfully as the ones you did. You didn't move to that city. You didn't say, "I love you," when you should have. You didn't stand up for yourself. You didn't take the risk. And still, those non-choices whisper through your mind late at night, like ghosts at the edge of your memory. Not fully real. Not fully gone. You think about the job you turned down, the person you almost became, the sentence you almost said that could have rewritten everything. We're told that our identity is defined by our actions. But what if part of who you are is also made up of the absences? The doors you closed before you looked inside? The silence that took the place of a scream? Sometimes the most pivotal moments of our lives are the ones we don't even notice as they're happening. The missed phone call. The day you didn't go. The opportunity that came and passed quietly, without fanfare. The thought that flickered and died before it became a decision. In retrospect, they feel monumental, like the universe was testing you, and you didn't even know it. And yet, here you are, reading this, breathing, living the life created by all those non-choices. That means something. But it also raises a question. If a choice you didn't make still shapes your path, then was it ever really a non-choice? Or was that silence its own kind of voice? Maybe what we don't choose reveals just as much about us as what we do, and that can be freeing or terrifying. Because sometimes we tell ourselves that we could have. We comfort ourselves with the idea that the door was always open, we just didn't walk through. But what if we couldn't? What if the choice was already made by the time we noticed it? Here's the quiet horror of this paradox. The realization that the person you could have been is just close enough to see, but always out of reach. They're walking down a hallway you locked behind you. You can imagine their thoughts, their relationships, their regrets. They feel real, because in a way, they are. And yet, the moment you made any decision, the others ceased to be. So what do we do with that? With the echo of choices that never took shape? Maybe we accept that not all roads were meant for us, that some versions of us were always meant to remain unrealized, so that this version could exist. Maybe the real power lies, not in obsessing over the choice you didn't make, but in finally listening to what it taught you, because even silence has something to say. It's not the fear of death. Death is something you can name, describe, even ritualize. You can prepare for it, philosophize about it, deny it, or even make peace with it. But what lies beneath that isn't death itself. It's non-existence. The idea that one day, the light may simply go out, and nothing will remain to know it ever shined. It's not just about your body stopping or your heart failing. It's about you, your thoughts, your memories, your awareness, ceasing to be not asleep, not dreaming, not floating in some ethereal realm, just erased, as if you never were. This fear has no shape, no teeth, no scream. It's quieter than silence. It creeps in not through horror but through stillness. A moment alone at night, a sudden suffocating thought while washing dishes, a blank space in your mind that swallows your attention with one question. What if I never existed to even ask this? Your name will be forgotten. Your memories scattered like ash. Every inside joke, every touch, every ache, every joy, gone, with no one left to remember they ever occurred. The world will move on. People will continue to breathe, eat, argue, dream, without any trace of your fingerprint on their sky. And slowly, surely, the ripple that was you will dissolve into a still pond. That's the real fear, isn't it? Not that life ends, but that it might not have meant anything at all. We build monuments to our existence. Photos, stories, digital profiles. We speak, we share, we perform. We leave marks in the hope that something, anything, will remain. That someone will remember. That our lives will echo just long enough to outpace the silence. But deep down, we know the silence is infinite. And we are not. So what do we do with this fear? How do we move through life knowing that everything we love, everything we are, may one day be swallowed by the void without leaving even a trace of its echo behind? Some deny it, distract themselves with routine, noise, ambition. Others spiritualize it, believing that consciousness transcends the body, that something eternal watches from behind the veil. Some find meaning in creation, pouring themselves into art, ideas, children, hoping those things will outlive them and speak their names when they no longer can. But no matter what we believe, the fear still returns. It doesn't knock, it seeps into those quiet spaces between breaths, into the way we grip life too tightly or let it slip through our fingers, into the ache we feel when we look up at the stars and realize they've been burning for billions of years without ever knowing we were here. Yet maybe the fear isn't a flaw. Maybe it's a compass. Because to fear not existing means you care that you do. It means you recognize the rarity, the preciousness of being conscious in this vast, cold universe. It means that in a reality where non-existence is the default, your simple act of being is already an act of defiance. A spark in the void, a sentence in the silence. So yes, the fear remains. But maybe that fear is not there to paralyze you. Maybe it's there to awaken you, to remind you that in this fleeting moment where the universe looks through your eyes, you are real, you are here, and perhaps that is enough. There's a version of you that never left the room, not physically, but in a deeper, stranger way. When you walked out, when you moved on, when you made peace or ran away, something stayed. It's still there. In that conversation you never finished, that moment you couldn't explain, that room where everything changed, or maybe didn't. It lingers like dust in a corner you stop noticing, but it watches, it remembers. This is the version that stayed behind. We carry this idea that we're always moving forward, always growing, always becoming more of ourselves. But time doesn't move in a straight line. Memory doesn't age. Emotion doesn't obey the clock. And sometimes we don't either. You might have walked out of a place, moved on from a chapter, but a piece of you, subtle, unseen, never did. Maybe it's still waiting for closure. Maybe it's still trying to explain itself. Maybe it's just sitting there, quietly refusing to move until someone notices. You sense it sometimes when you revisit old places, a childhood home, a hospital room, the chair at the edge of someone's bed. Even if the furniture is gone, the feeling isn't. You feel yourself becoming that version again, as if time folded in on itself, and the past is not behind you, but beside you. That version remembers things you've forgotten. It aches in places you've numbed. It still believes in things you stopped saying aloud. And when life feels fractured, when you don't recognize the person in the mirror, it's often because you left without all of you, and now the past is pulling at your sleeve. Not to punish you, but to remind you. That unresolved version is not a ghost. It's not your enemy. It's not weakness. It's simply unfinished. And unfinished doesn't mean broken. It just means waiting. Waiting for you to come back. Not to stay, but to acknowledge. To say, I remember. To say, you mattered. To say, I couldn't carry all of you with me, but I never meant to leave you behind. This version doesn't want control. It doesn't want to rewrite your life. It just wants to be seen, fully, without shame, without rush, without trying to convert pain into wisdom or wrap it all up into a quote you'll forget tomorrow. It wants to be allowed to exist. So pause. Close your eyes and visit that room again, not physically, but in the quiet theater of your mind. Walk in, see yourself sitting there, and for once, don't ask them to move. Don't explain the progress you've made or how much better things are now. Just sit, just be, just feel. And maybe, in that stillness, that version can finally stand. Not to follow you, not to merge with you, but to nod, to say, thank you for coming back. Then you'll know. Healing isn't always about moving on. Sometimes, healing is about returning to the parts of yourself that waited long after you left. And when you finally leave again, it will be together, in the corner of a long-forgotten room, dust dances in a sunbeam. It looks meaningless, random, lifeless. But what if I told you that within each floating speck is a memory? Not yours, not mine, but a fragment of time itself. That's the heart of this paradox. Memory hidden in dust. Dust is the residue of everything that was. Skin cells, shattered stone, faded paper, fallen stars. Every fleck that settles on a surface carries history, even if we no longer recognize it. The paradox asks, if memory isn't just in minds, but in matter, then where does it end? Think about an abandoned library. Cobwebs crown shelves. Books remain sealed by time. You walk through, brushing dust from a table. That layer? It's more than neglect. It's a record. It remembers the heat of sunlight that once fell on it, the fingertips that touched it, the breath that lingered above it. The dust is not just what's left, it's what was. We assume memory requires consciousness, a brain, neurons, synapses. But what if the universe has its own form of memory? What if dust is its filing system? Silent, slow, infinite. Scientists have long studied how objects retain traces. A fingerprint on glass, a footprint in sand, radiation in fossils. But what if even more is preserved? What if memory is embedded at the atomic level, and every particle carries a faint echo of what it once witnessed? A particle of dust on your desk may have once floated through a battlefield. Another may have clung to the robe of a monk 1,000 years ago. You'll never know. But it knows. The paradox becomes sharper when we introduce the idea of forgotten knowledge. Civilizations lost to time, languages erased, cultures burned. Where did that knowledge go? If memory truly vanishes, it's gone forever. But if it hides, in dust, in relics, in the spaces we ignore, then it's simply waiting to be uncovered, or maybe waiting to return. There's a kind of sacred stillness in old places, not just from age, but from density. The accumulation of presence. You're not just standing in a room, you're standing in layers of time. Every inch carries the impressions of those who came before. Their footsteps, their breath, their sorrow, their laughter. Dissolved now. Yet, somehow suspended in air, you can't touch these memories directly. But sometimes, when the light hits just right, when the dust spins slow and golden, it feels like something is speaking. Not in words, but in atmosphere, in weight, in resonance. You feel it. A moment that isn't yours, but still remembers you. And maybe that's the ultimate twist. The dust remembers you too. Your presence becomes another whisper in its vast, silent library. When you leave, it will settle again. Your breath, your warmth, your energy, joining the millions of forgotten fragments, gently folding you into the long continuum of memory. So the next time you wipe a surface clean, pause for a moment. Don't just see dirt. You're erasing history, or maybe waking it up. What existed in the moment before you were born, not your memories, not your body, not your name, not even your story. The moment before your existence is a silence so complete, it resists description. And yet, it happened. Or did it? This is the paradox of the moment before you were born. A time that must have existed, but one you can never truly access, imagine, or remember. A moment that had to be real for you to exist, and yet, from your perspective, it's more unknowable than death. Death, at least, is imagined in contrast to life. We think of endings because we've seen beginnings. But what came before you? Not just before your thoughts, but before your being. Some say it's nothingness. But nothingness isn't blank space or darkness. It's not quiet. It's not even still. It's a concept we try to paint with words, but all language breaks down before it. You weren't asleep. You weren't waiting. There was no you to even not be. And still, here you are. So what bridge did you cross? Did consciousness flicker into the universe out of nowhere? Or were you always part of something dispersed like stardust before becoming a self? Here's where it gets stranger. If you were never conscious of the moment before your birth, what separates it from the moment after your death? If time for you began with your first breath, is your personal universe only as old as your awareness? Is the Big Bang real if you weren't there to witness it? Or did existence, in some strange way, begin when you began noticing it? And what about all the things happening before you arrived? Wars fought, people loved, galaxies spinning. Did they really happen to you, or are they just stories handed down, reconstructed in your brain? You remember your childhood. You imagine your future. But the moment before birth remains a blind spot so vast, it might as well not exist. And yet, it is the foundation upon which everything you are is built. So here's a question that unravels even the most grounded mind. If you can never touch that moment and never know that time, what part of you ever truly started? Was there ever a clean beginning? Or are you simply a continuation of something eternal that occasionally forgets what it is? Because maybe you weren't created in that moment. Maybe you were only revealed, and in that case, birth wasn't the beginning. It was the remembering. A remembering so total, it felt new. The paradox holds steady. The moment before you were born isn't empty. It's full of questions you're still asking. And maybe the moment before any beginning is not about what comes next, but about the space that makes becoming possible. So next time you wonder who you are, pause and look back, not at your past, but at that impossible moment behind you. The one with no memory, no thought, no self, yet somehow it led you here. And in that silent mystery, you might find the soft echo of a truth too big to name. It begins quietly, a single thought, nothing dramatic, just a flicker in the static, a whisper between blinking lights. Maybe it comes during a conversation, or while brushing your teeth, or just before sleep wraps its fingers around your awareness. It seems harmless at first, forgettable even, but it lingers, and then it loops. You try to dismiss it. You tell yourself it's nothing, a mental echo, a loose wire, but the thought is patient. It doesn't demand your attention. It waits for silence. And the moment the world calms, there it is, unchanged, uninvited, unresolved. It doesn't shout, it repeats. The thought that won't go away is not loud, it's persistent. And its persistence begins to alter things. You change the way you think around it. You build walls of distraction, reroute conversations, keep your mind busy, because you know, the second you slow down, it returns. A quiet presence behind your eyes, tapping gently on the inside of your skull, as if asking, "Remember me?" It could be a question you never answered, a truth you never faced, a fear you refused to name. It may not even make sense to you anymore, but sense isn't the point. Weight is. And this thought is heavy. What's strange is how such a small thing begins to shape your entire mental landscape. It's like a single grain of sand in your shoe. It shouldn't matter, but every step reminds you it's there. You change your walk, your posture, your route, and soon your entire journey becomes a response to something so tiny, yet so inescapably present. People around you might not notice, but you do. You feel the way you pause before speaking, editing yourself subconsciously. You sense the strange gap between your laughter and your thoughts. You know you've started measuring time by the distance between distractions. Anything to postpone the next return of that same unrelenting idea. But what if the thought is not a parasite? What if it's a signal? A truth you're not ready for, disguised as irritation, a lesson wrapped in discomfort. What if this thought keeps coming back because it never actually left? You did. And now it has found its way home, knocking, softly, persistently, at the door of your denial. You consider listening, not because you're ready, but because you're tired. Tired of circling it without looking, of avoiding something so familiar it already lives in your reflection. So, one day, without ceremony, you stop running, you sit, and you let the thought speak. It doesn't shout. It never needed to. It simply unfolds, slowly, painfully. It brings with it memories you buried in metaphors, feelings you edited out of your story, choices you dressed as accidents. It unearths the version of you that still waits to be seen, not judged, not fixed, just acknowledged. And in that moment, something unexpected happens. The thought softens. It's no longer a loop. It's a mirror. And mirrors do not harm. They reflect. What you feared was an intruder was, all along, a fragment of you that refused to be erased. The thought that won't go away may never leave, but it doesn't have to haunt you, because once you've faced it, once you've listened, it transforms from a whisper in the dark into a compass, from a weight into a witness. It is no longer the enemy. It is the part of you that remembered when you tried to forget. So we arrive at the end, the last note, the final frame, the conclusion. But what is a conclusion? Is it a moment of peace, or a silent lie we tell ourselves to stop asking questions? Welcome to the paradox of conclusion. We chase conclusions everywhere, in stories, in science, in philosophy. We crave them because they feel safe, final, clean, like the last puzzle piece finally snapping into place. But conclusions are rarely what they seem. In science, one conclusion is often just a launchpad for more questions. The moment you think you found the truth, it shifts, expands, or contradicts itself. What was once solid becomes fluid. The atom was once indivisible. The earth once flat. Each conclusion we held turned out to be a stepping stone towards something more complex. In life, conclusions never come alone. Graduation, it's not the end. It's the start of responsibility. Retirement, not a conclusion, but a redefinition of purpose. Even death, the ultimate full stop, is not always seen as an end. In beliefs, in legacy, in memory, it lingers, echoes, inspires. So perhaps the paradox is this: a conclusion is never truly conclusive. It only feels final because we decide to stop looking beyond it. Now think of stories. How many books end with a twist that reopens the narrative? How many films leave you wondering what really happened? And how many moments in your own life have you labeled the end, only to realize later they were transitions in disguise? Here's a deeper layer. What if the conclusion is a mirror? Not a destination, but a reflection, showing you where you've been, but never quite where you're going. It gives the illusion of closure, while quietly setting up the next act. Even language betrays this idea. The word conclusion comes from Latin concludere, to shut up, enclose, or confine. But can you truly confine thought, or curiosity, or existence? Some philosophers argue that true conclusions don't exist, only pauses, moments where we agree to rest before resuming the endless cycle of seeking, doubting, and rediscovering. So here's the truth hidden in plain sight. There is no final word. Even this, right now, what feels like the end of the paradox, journey, is just a space between thoughts, a breath before the next question. The loop isn't closed, it continues. Quietly, in your mind. Because the conclusion is not the last line. It's the pause before you turn the page.